This is VCD 2541 production log number 3. What I've got is the one that I'm currently clicked on as active. This is a build from the beginning of the course, actually the last build from the previous course, and I'm continuing with the project. And then the build on the right here is the most current one for this week, which I've gone as far with the menu design as I intend to go for this project. So let's just start out. What I did do is I have already gone into options and I've muted the sound and the effects, the music and the effects on both builds, although that does not include the cannon fire and some of the background effects like the seagulls, unfortunately. So I've already turned that down on both, so we might as well start with the options panel. And we've got the music, the effects, and then a voices column here, which I turned off because I'm not using that. Let's go ahead and go to the options panel on mine so you can see the difference, and also, you know, they don't fit on the screen. I cannot resize these. They're not built to be resized, so they'll overlap a little bit, but you can get a general idea of the layouts. And I have gone through all the processes in the previous weeks and some of my thought processes and reasons why I've done things. So we'll just kind of take a look and see the difference. And let's go back and let's go to the credits, which is really, there's not much to that. I've called credits info, but that is where I would plan to put some credits for let's say the music soundtrack and anything that any resource that I've used, I plan to cite. Okay, so let's go back on both menus and let's check out the profiles menu. Here's the original. Last time you saw that there was a little gold skull in place of this star, and the stars are earned as the player goes through the different levels. Each level is worth 3 stars, and so this profile, the whole idea of the profile is that this shows the number of stars that the player has earned. It keeps track of it, so every time the player opens up the game and continues on, it's recording the rewards that in the form of stars that the player's getting, and this heart represents the number of lives, and the default start number of lives at the start is 3, so that's why there's a number 3. And the reason there's 0 stars is because this is a build that nobody has really played yet, so that's the reason there's 0. The world 0 and the stage 0, that represents this menu starter kit comes with the option of setting up multiple worlds, so each world will have different stages, or what I'm calling them are levels. So there could be, you know, I don't know how many worlds. You could have 3 worlds, let's say, where each world could have, you know, 20 levels in it. I chose to only have 1 world in mind, and so far I plan to have 2 or 3 stages completed for the end of the project. I'm on 1 right now. The thing about these is that there's, because of the scripting that displays this, and it's running behind the scenes, I am not able to change first of all, I'm not able to hide. If there's only 1 world, there's no real reason to show, you know, world 1 here, because that doesn't make a lot of sense. The player is going to go, well, what do you mean? What do you mean this is world 1? Is there another world someplace? And there's not. So I would choose to hide that. Also, I would choose, instead of a stage, I would choose to call it a level. And that seems more common to me and intuitive that you just call it a level rather than a stage. I mean, the stage is the technical term for it as a game designer, I suppose, or a 3D game designer in Unity. It's a stage, but as a player, I think you think of things as levels. The problem here is that even if I change the placeholder text in the game object, in the text GUI game object, when the game starts, the script will automatically replace it with world 0, stage 0, and there's no way to get rid of this. There's no way for me to hide the world 0. I've tried it by resizing the little text area, and it doesn't work. I'm not going to go into demonstrating that, but it just doesn't work. So I'm stuck with world 0, stage, and stage. And so what I decided to do is just to eliminate these, turn that text object or text component off in the game object so that it just doesn't appear. The script is keeping track of it behind the scenes, but it's never displays for the player, so it really, I would like to for the player keep track of how many levels they've gone through, but ultimately I had to make a choice. Do I want world 0, or do I want world and stage in there, or do I want none? And I went with none. And actually, you know what, it does simplify this a little bit. There's no reason we can't just have a profile with a name. Here's how many lives you have, and here's how many stars you've earned. I think that's plenty, I guess. Okay, so I'll go ahead and let's take a look at mine. Okay, so here's the side-by-side comparison. And just to kind of reiterate what I had talked about in previous videos, these are the same exact game objects as these. I did not delete or replace any game objects that were placed in the scene with by the mobile menu starter kit, which is what I'm using for this. All I've done is I've either turned off this frame game object, or it's called a container or frame. It still exists because these other objects are nested inside, so if I deleted it or turned it off, then everything else would go. If I move these children objects out of that container that has the frame on it, nothing would function because, again, the script is looking for the game objects in a certain hierarchy, so without rewriting the script, which kind of loses the whole point of using something like this to begin with, something that's pre-scripted, to rewrite the script. All these game objects still exist over here. It's just that, for example, this container that has a frame on it, the container is there, but the frame image component is turned off. So there is an invisible container here which I could go and click on, and you would see that gold frame on here. It would look kind of funny, but it would be there. So the challenge for me was to how do I go from this to this without replacing or deleting any of these game objects over here. It was quite a learning curve, but I think that I'm happy overall with the result, and I think it looks a lot more refined than this. I don't want to diss on the programmers that provided this. They're more programmers than designers, and I come from the opposite background, so I have a little bit more experience with layout and design and stuff like that. So I think my educated opinion on this, or experienced opinion on this, is that mine looks better, in quotes, than the original. But we could qualify that by saying, what does better mean? And I'd say better is that it is, I'd say it's a little bit visually cleaner, easier to read. There's the typography is a little bit cleaner, and there's a bit more of a higher typographic hierarchy. So even though this is a video game concept, I come from a typography background, so that's an extremely important component to me, and I focused a lot on how to change the fonts, and did a lot of put a lot of thought into that. I also did create, so just to give credit where credit is due. This is a stock image of the dagger. The skulls are based on a stock illustration, which I customized and added the dimension and the color. The heart is just is based on a Zap dingbat of a heart, and then in Photoshop, in a similar way that I illustrated digitally illustrated this skull, the heart is done in a similar way in Photoshop using filters and layers and different things. I did stick with a color scheme. I don't want to say developed a color scheme. I actually borrowed a color scheme. Rather than start a color scheme from scratch, I found a color scheme that that I borrowed from another source, so that all the colors are, I'd say they're a bit more muted in tone than these. This is more like I'd say Candy Crush style or something like that in terms of bright cartoonish colors. And mine, I just wanted mine to be a little bit more a little more sober looking, but still, still interesting. So there's some thought put into, a little bit of my, I guess, philosophy of how I approach this in terms of design. And also just, I mentioned last time as well that I wanted to get away from the boxiness of these. Another thing I thought was important is that the idea that the original ones are centered in the middle of the camera frame, camera view, and mine is offset, so it's kind of there's some other interesting things going on. These are really not that complex that they need an entire screen. They don't need to take up the entire screen. There's room for other stuff. So I'm happy with what I've done here, and I think it's puts things in a good direction. So next thing I did was work on the scores menu, and here's the original, and then here's mine. Okay, so it's pretty basic, but it needs to be. One of the things I had to consider is that when you type a name in, the name could be a few characters longer than this, 2 or 3 characters longer, depending on the character. If it's all caps O's, fewer will fit in this space than if it's all lowercase i's. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So it's hard to give you an exact number of characters. It would be hard to give the player an exact number of characters that will fit. And then also there has to be enough room for a score to fit in here. Again, it's at 0 just because these builds are unplayed essentially, so there's no scores. This dagger doesn't move yet, but there would be 10 of the top scores in here that would fit. As different scores would be played, then this would fill up, and then it would function if some of the scores, 10 score. I think about six scores will fit here. So maybe I can add one. So what I can do is just show some of the functionality quickly or briefly. Let's create a new profile, and I'll just type in a name. We'll type in Joe. Okay, so we have a new profile. Let me do the same over here. Whoops. Do that. Let's create new profile. Joe. Okay, so something to note is that the active profile is the one that is in green. So that is going to be the player. When I click on this one here, Michael, and I go to play the game, that is who the scores are going to be assigned to. So just it's important to see that there's this functionality in which the active player is green. So it does function over here too. So if I want my active player to be Michael, I click on that and it becomes green. Okay. If I restarted this build with this other profile in there, when I go back to the scores menu, it will appear. And you know what? I think it's worth doing really quickly just to show. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me restart that build. Okay, so there we go. So when I restart the build, I have a second profile. So this gives you an idea of the spacing as well. Okay, so that's that. In the Profiles menu, I just wanted to point out that under Create New Profiles, I have this little, we'll say a little piece of driftwood that I'm using as the pop-up menu, which I think is quite a bit more interesting than this. I'd like to think that. So I did have this in place. I believe I had this in place last time, and I did something I wanted it to stand out from the background more than it did before. So I did add or modify this drop shadow to I made it a bit darker and to kind of let this visually come forward and the rest of the menu visually go backwards. So let's cancel that, and then let's do a discard too. That's kind of fun. So I'm going to discard this Joe profile, and there it is. So I'll say, are you sure you want to discard? Yes, I do. Let's do the same thing. Let's discard this Joe profile. Yes, I am sure. Okay. So those are the comparisons of the original menus with the ones that I've been working on developing over the past few weeks, and with that I'm going to conclude. So thank you for watching.